Son of the Goddess is back. Hooray, he says on iTunes review. Monty casts are back, and the two boys bickering in a big shed like grumpy fishwives with Heather lost in the middle. Marvellous entertainment. She should put them both on stage as a two-man comedy act, and they should be called the Fighting Farm Boys.
Fighting Farm Boys.
Or the Herefordshire Mumblers.
Who's this? Where's this from?
This is Son of the Goddess. This is the depressed chap on the tube every morning. Do you remember he writes this and says, we cheer up a dismal tube journey. So he's really coming on because he's actually happy here. Anyway, carry on with it.
I think you do set these things up, don't you, Hev? In fact, it was probably a sneaky ploy to go into the shed, the barn, which was particularly cold.
It was cold.
Just put us on wait. Bide your time, stay in the office in the warm for a while, make sure you kind of loiter outside, waiting.
You're good at loitering and...
So by the time you come out, we're completely fed up anyway, in which case it's like, just throw a bit of bait in and, watch the sparks fly.
Do-do-do.
That's terrible, isn't it?
Do-do-do in the right corner.
I don't know why we put up with it.
Anyway, I'm finished this review. This is a Son of the Goddess who was depressed. Look at him, he's totally cheery. Never thought I would know so much about the water content of a grain. And you know what? It was interesting. So much so.
Does that mean I'm interesting?
No, don't be silly, Father. In fact, I was so engrossed that I did not fall asleep on the train for the first time in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
The pod mastery continues. And I think that is worth a round of applause for the Son of the Goddess staying awake on the train because he was so fed up of it. Ready, team?
Fair play.
Well done.
The fact that he went to sleep when he got to work is neither here nor there as a result, presumably. So presumably wherever he works, and most displeased because he's now fatigued when he gets to work. But
I think Herefordshire Mumblers is good.
I think that's a good review. I'm particularly pleased with that review. Nice review.
For those of you that wondered what the strange at the beginning of last week's podcast, it was Monty practising his singing. You'll be glad to hear he has not made the choir. But he has made the B team of the cricket.
Oh, fair play.
There we are. Now, in this week's show, we've got a Montycast, a weekly fact on wiggliness. We've got Terry's veggie tips.
Yep.
We hear about Richard's lambing. But first off, we've got some feedback from Tim Teague. Tim Teague has a lovely set of proper cattle.
Right.
Hereford cattle.
Okay.
In
lovely.
Shropshire. He is a member of FWAG. He was down in Defra giving them earache the other day.
He's chairman of Shropshire FWAG.
He's chairman of Shropshire FWAG. He's a good old boy.
Sounds like a nice chap.
But he's put out about... He's a leaf farmer.
Yeah.
Is he organic?
I believe he is, actually. I think his beef goes to Waitrose on a Waitrose contract.
There's a great picture of him.
He's an all-round decent farmer.
There's a big
really.
stand-up picture of Tim Teague looking proudly upon his pasture.
Have I ever met him? I think he's on Facebook, one of my Facebook friends.
He
but
is.
I'm not sure I've ever met the chap.
I don't know whether you have or not. I have no interest in your meetings.
Okay. I know. Well, that tells you the case, isn't it? Hey?
Here we go. This is what he says. Rural Defence. This is about the Set Aside podcast.
Okay.
I enjoyed the podcast and I feel honoured to be mentioned by name. A point regarding SAS, Set Aside. Thank you, as opposed to Special Air Service. That needs to be made loudly by you, Phil, is the total injustice of imposing set-aside on farms that have been in stewardship, having been doing the right thing and have constructively used their least productive areas, for example, your 20 acres. The imposition of set-aside, either voluntary or cross-compliant, is a double whammy to us, as we inevitably have to lose more productive land. This then becomes a heavy-handed attempt to get conservation onto farms that are either unsuitable or uninterested at the expense of conservationist types. Quality managed area gets results. Quantity area with a big stick will not. Tell them that from me, Tim. Now, you forwarded this to me. And I just don't know what he's on about because I don't understand the words.
Right, I will try and explain.
Sorry, Tim.
The situation in this country is that there are several different government schemes to encourage farmers or pay farmers to do things for environmental benefit. And that's what he means by stewardship. So we have two schemes. One is called the entry-level scheme, which is the bog standard one. And then you have the higher level scheme for which you can do really quite plush capital jobs and get money for, fence your rivers off.
We've spoken about this. This is the schemes that you thought were paying you for not good reasons and decided not to use.
Absolutely.
You want to do things
I
because
don't personally agree with them, but that's not that I disagree with the conservation aspect. It's I disagree with the government telling me what I'm going to do. However, Tim and a number of other farmers, and he is in the higher level scheme, which is a whole farm scheme. You can't just say I'm going to do one field here and not there. It takes into account the whole farm, and it's quite onerous. You have to work quite hard to get into it. But as he says, essentially what you're doing is taking the most environmentally beneficial bits of land and putting a management regime on them based on environmental benefit, so that he won't crop bits, or he will restrict the cropping, so he might use no nitrogen on bits of unimproved grassland, create flower meadows, have margins and all the rest of it. And so the higher level scheme...
But you've done that and you're not in the scheme.
No, that's right. But if you leave me out of it,
okay.
He has done it, he's gone through all the thing, and he and a number of other farmers have done that. Now, because of EEC rules, and because they reckon that set-aside has an environmental benefit, and I would say that for the most part it doesn't, but anyway, they then say they're not allowed to double fund the same piece of ground. So that the fields that he set aside, as it were, under the higher level scheme, can't count as ground taken out of production. So he has to take more ground out of production. And so he loses for doing it right. And what is so...
So just a minute then. So he has taken his farm and say he's got 10% of it now that is out of production.
Yep.
Which is correct.
Yep.
And he's got all the marks right for a holistic approach to
and
the farm.
he gets fairly fairly generously paid for doing that. But that's fair enough. He's done quite a lot of work to achieve it. But to then impose on that farmer more set aside
when it's not needed in that farm.
He's then taking his good productive ground out of production.
I see.
And the result has been that, particularly at entry level scheme, which is less effort required and less money involved, these schemes are in 5-year chunks. You sign up for 5 or 10 years and you can't come out of it. You're committed to that length of time. And the first 5 years of entry level scheme has just come up, and the majority of people are saying, I'm not going back into that. Not while they're hanging set-aside over us.
So, is this a farmer, Phil? Because I remember many years ago on this podcast discussing whether or not you were going to enter the entry-level scheme, and Richard and I encouraging the process because it was a beneficial conservation process, and you saying you'd rather do it and not go into the scheme.
It's not a
so you have gained because you're not in the scheme, so you don't have to take the double whammy out of the
production.
have
gained, but it's not a farmer, Phil, because as it's turned out, the people who've worked hardest, it takes a lot of effort to do higher level scheme stuff, they will suffer the most. And the true irony of it is that why are the government, Whitehall, Europe, fussed about set-aside when in a few years' time you cannot find any pundit who will tell you that they won't need every piece of land for food production, notwithstanding having some environmental land put aside. So that surely it's better to have the environmental schemes preserve or create the good bits of environmental habitat, but having vast acres of, as Tim puts it, uninteresting land that is just not producing food. It has no environmental benefit. That there is quite a lot of evidence to suggest that if you have a 50-acre field, you might have some environmental benefit around the margins, but the middle of it is, broadly speaking, of no environmental consequence. It's just not producing food.
Has this been decided, or is there a lobbying group? Because it seems to me that if you've then done your higher level stewardship scheme, the sensible thing would be that you've got your brownie points, so you should be exempt from the next bit.
Well, what Tim, among others, he actually went yesterday to DEFRA as part of a delegation because they're trying to decide whether to impose a fixed rate of set-aside on all of us, which is what Tim et al. Are dead against because that would make them lose out, or they're wondering whether a voluntary set-aside scheme would be more sensible. And obviously the voluntary set-aside scheme would be more sensible because then people like me who are not in a stewardship scheme would say, well, there you are, I've already volunteered my set-aside, there it is already, thank you very much, I comply. Or Tim would say, I've already volunteered this, that or the other. I'm not expecting any more money for the privilege, but I comply with your requirement not to grow 1.5% or 2% of my arable area because it's already in environmental stewardship. All these things would seem logical, and the worst of it is that next year, if the forecasts for harvest yields this year are proved to be right, next year they'll be clamouring for no set-aside at all because the price of wheat will be skyrocketing again, and they'll be saying, oh, food's too expensive and the stock feed's too expensive, we've got to reduce the price of wheat, and the best way of doing it is to produce more of it.
Isn't it, Rich, no wonder that farmers come across as moaning old gits? Because the thing is, if you've done it right and then it still isn't right, it's depressing. I feel depressed myself.
Yeah,
I'm going to go on Son of the Goddess's train and go to sleep.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle, really, because the more difficulties you're faced with, the more difficult it is to remain upbeat. So you can quite see why there's as much moaning as there is amongst the farming community, and of course then it puts people off a bit, doesn't it? You know, with all that moaning, and it's a difficult one. But I can appreciate every point that Phil has made there. It's all pretty depressing stuff. It's just something that we spoke about before: an utter lack of common sense in the administration.
It's such a shame because what they've forgotten in sustainability and having biodiversity is the human is part of it, and the human needs food and he needs some pride in his land, and if he can't grow any food he's not actually called a farmer anymore.
You will, I think, see in the not too far distant future, given the current credit crisis and all the rest of it, that governments, not only the British government, are going to be forced to look at delivering value for money for some of the things they do. Not just DEFRA, but over the last week we've had our budget here. There's complete carnage in terms of government expenditure.
Oh, he's going off on the government. I'm stopping him.
And there's no value for money in what they're doing. So that these schemes, which are government schemes, they're going to have to deliver to the people who pay, i.e. the taxpayer, something that the taxpayer wants for their money. If they don't deliver, they won't be able to do them because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
Right, now doesn't Farmer Phil sound like a perfectly decent, upstanding person who really, sort of sensible, don't you think? Sort of sensible.
So. Certainly.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Monty Cast first because we're going to hear what he got up to the night before last.
The Monty Cast, a weekly fact on wiggliness. Every week I fill up 52 feeders with bird food in the Wiggly garden. Another Montycast next week on the Wiggly Podcast.
So then, Hev.
Yeah.
We've all been sat here waiting with bated breath for the dirt on oh-so sensible Farmer Phil.
Yeah.
So, lay it on us.
Well, Farmer Phil set off to the Seed Conference.
Right.
And it was run by
British Seed Houses at what used to be IGA and is now IBERS, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an Institute of Grassland Research at Aberystwyth.
It's a very sensible conference.
Oh.
It's run by British Seed Houses who are on the 8th generation of proprietor, and it was started in 1820 in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Yep. And so off he goes in his truck to Aberystwyth and returns home, quite, all the pleasantries in place. And I said, how did the conference go, over a cup of tea? And he discussed the ins and outs of clover and how he'd learnt the importance of clover, the nitrogen content of clover, etc., etc.
You guys have the best conversations.
Thank you, Richard. Nothing else is said. last evening we went to go out, and somewhere around Bredardine, 4 miles from home, he said, ha ha ha, a little funny incident happened whilst I was away.
Right.
And I said, ha ha ha, what was that funny incident, Farmer Phil? And he said, for some strange reason, after a night out with the boys, I came back to my hotel room, and the next thing I remember is being outside it. It's being locked with no clothes on. I was like,
really? Oh dear.
That's not a small incident.
Well, I think you'll find it.
I think you'll find it is a small incident.
How do you know? I have told you, haven't you?
And so he was so trying to make light of it.
The lifetime of stick. Yeah. So what happened?
What happened? Well, apparently it was completely innocent. He was sleepwalking,
right,
without any clothes on,
in the
night, and he had to go to the night porter in the night to get his key for his room.
No way. Which was fine.
Do you sleepwalk then? Do you sleepwalk?
No,
I have been known to, but what made it chuckle? So obviously there is a fairly high level of embarrassment, but on the basis that there's no solution, you just have to get on with it, don't you? So I get back into the room and look at the clock, and it says 5 o'clock or something like that.
You don't seem at all bothered by this.
And I think, oh well. And so the following morning I go down to breakfast, and one of my colleagues is laughing his head off, and he says, you'll never guess what happened last night. And I said, what? Thinking, oh
no, what else have I done?
Only exactly the same thing had happened to one of the other delegates.
Really?
But what I don't know, having thought about it since, is did I approach the night porter first or second? Whatever did he think when he had another one?
I said, does this mean when I stay at hotels, every night that I'm there, there's 2 nude men wandering around in the corridor?
Yeah.
Because that quite puts me off.
There was all sorts of different things going through my head at night. Seed conferences and naked men, I'm just thinking, oh, Lord. This is just obviously something was sown. And the worst happened.
So anyway,
did you share a room with the other chaps?
Single rooms.
Just all.
Just on your own.
Because you've done.
Otherwise,
I was going back to your school days. Of all sort of lads running around together naked in dorms and things like that.
Yeah, of course, Rich. Anyway, having had a good chuckle at that, I did assemble a little piece of information which I pre-recorded the other day, and I think now would be an appropriate time to hear it. But we've always known you as Frugal Fishborn, and I think this might just prove the point. Now, Eric Goff, who I'm with this morning, you are a long-term, well, you're almost a relative of Ricardo's, but you've known Ricardo some time, and you came up with a little snippet for me a few minutes ago, which I'd like you to share with our listeners.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, Richard is almost related. His wife, Sarah, and my wife, Karen, are cousins, but I was recounting a time when I visited his house, and his wife, Sarah, had mentioned to us that he had requested that she cuts the kitchen towel into 3 pieces beyond the perforated edge, because he'd thought that perhaps one piece was just too much to be used, and we know he can be a bit tight, but I thought that was a little bit extreme to reduce the manufacturer's recommended square footage, if you like, of one piece of kitchen towel into thirds.
Not that I'm saying Ricardo's tight, but here's a bit of evidence.
Rich, I think that is a silly thing to share, because I expect nothing less of you.
Yeah, there you are. You see, I don't see a problem with that at all.
Do
No.
So you cut them into 4, actually, don't you?
And I tell you what, I watched the other night. I saw this fab programme with Kirsty Allsop.
Yes.
It was a moment
Oh,
I turned on.
that.
And I thought, oh, it's lovely Kirsty, because I do like
crafty
her.
Kirsty's
She's
home
definitely real
craft.
warmth about her. And anyway, she was expounding the virtues of skip diving.
skip diving.
Yeah, she was pulling all this stuff out of skips, and she was asking the people who had set up their skips outside their homes whether she could go and have a look and see what goodies she could find in there and things like that. I thought, fair play. A woman after my own heart.
I wonder what you were doing in the garage earlier.
There's no skips in the garage there.
Listen, I want to know about your lambing, because last year we heard a bit of a disaster about Ricardo's lambing. It's lambing time. What's the news from Ricardo's folly?
Well, it's good news this year, because I've been getting up, and it lost, what was it? No, where are we now? So it's a week ago, more than a week ago, 8 days ago, my friend Richard Wallace came out and he took a look at the ewes and he said, they're all pregnant. This one, the dark ewe that lost her lambs last year, is going to pop within about 48 hours. So ever since then, I've been going to check him at midnight, checking him at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then obviously
has nothing to do with the jip he got last year.
So I just felt so sad, and listeners will listen to that sad story last year, and I
understood how upset you were, Rich, as well.
I was upset, and it is very upsetting, oddly. So anyway, I didn't want that same to happen this year. Yesterday morning, 9:30, the black ewe decided to throw her first lamb. So of course we saw her down, ran down into the paddock. Sarah was stuck her head out of the window, screaming, Rich, come on. So we ran down there, and she had her first lamb. So we picked the little lambie up and took it across into the shed, and the ewe came and sat down. Anyway, you could tell there was another one in there. So she seemed to perhaps, she sort of fell on her side and whatnot, and she was straining. She was obviously having problems, you see. So I thought, right, that's it. It was about an hour. I thought, that's enough time. I'm going to get my hand in there and see, and give it a hand, quite literally. So I've never done it before. I've been told how to do it, but of course I've never even seen it done actually. But I've been told, so I thought, right, take the bull by the horns. So I came
or
up
the sheep by the head, as it were.
Yeah. So lovely little ewe. So I put my arm around her, and she knew what was happening. She felt. I think they probably know, don't they, that you're sort of helping them. And so I stuck my hand in there, and I could feel this little nose and the head, what a big head, and feel 1 foot. And unfortunately, I couldn't get my hand anywhere else. So I grabbed the 1 foot and pulled, and I was pulling gently, sort of sufficiently enough to help her. I was conscious not to pull too hard. And anyway, after a bit of to-ing and fro-ing for about 10 minutes or something like that, possibly, it may have seemed longer, out came this beautiful little ram lamb and popped down on the floor, and I pulled the stuff off it because she whipped around and started licking all the stuff away from its head and shoulders and things like that. And there they were, a beautiful little pair of lambs.
Aww.
So she's all happy in the shed. Nice bit of bonding time in the old bonding pen. This morning, another ewe popped out, lovely little ewe lamb. So this morning, first thing, I popped her down into the shed, and that would be her first lamb ever. So she's down there this morning. So there are 2 in there. So I've got 1 to go. So success thus far. So I'm feeling quite chirpy.
I think it's another little round of applause.
I'll tell you what. It's one of those moments. Yesterday's lambing, because I had everything there that I love. My lovely wife, and when I gazed across the paddock, I could see all the swallows dipping across the paddock. Just on that nice early grass that's emerging now. And in the background was the cuckoo, and it was the best experience, And so it was a wonderful thing. And there was me after the lamb. I sat down in the straw amongst all the sheep poo in the shed, and just looked at this wonderful thing that's kind of emerging around me. And really, that was one of those moments where you couldn't wish to be anywhere else in the world.
Oh,
I'm filling up.
me, welling up. How are you, listener?
Poor old son of the goddess. Pieces now.
But oddly, Philip's got a bit teary. And I've got a bit teary. Yeah, that's right.
Michael's in floods. Dear, oh dear.
Here you go, read a review. Cheer yourself up, man.
Okay, right.
Fred
Okay,
Gray.
I've unplugged your computer. Right, Fred Gray, okay. How I found Wiggly Wigglers. I found their catalogue in my office cupboard. Lost catalogue at hospital and searched for website. The trio are funny, knowledgeable and interesting. Heather laughs a lot, but questions well. Richard is better than Bill Oddie with nature and green information. Farmer Phil is the man you want to live next door. No, believe you me, he's not. That's just me ad-libbing, sorry. He answers questions and tells of farming and nature. Support is from young Monty and Toast the dog. I've now been listening for nearly 3 months and have started catching up on their lives as detailed in podcasts for 2005 and 2006. I might hear them all by Christmas. That's fab.
Isn't
Nice
that
one.
nice?
Nice one, Fred. I'm assuming that's your proper name. Oh, fabulous. Thanks for that.
5-starer. Thank you very much. Now, before we go, Rich, you've been down with Terry.
Down with Terry. I float down to see Terry on Wednesday. The allotments have completely changed, and we did the podcast that goes out normally. And no, the changed in the sense that it really is blooming.
Oh, is it?
Heather's radishes are growing, if that's any help.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, fabulous.
Yes.
Well, that's good news. I'm going to... And those tomatoes I brought over for you, you've looked after?
I've looked after them, Rich. I've watered them every day.
Fab.
And
you've got your plants
Megan.
up in those wellies, ready for the hay garden?
I have.
Excellent. Well, that's good news. But anyway, Terry on fine form, as per usual, and I asked him for 3 tips, cajoled him into 3 interesting tips that you wouldn't necessarily think of, and in keeping with the peculiar season that we're having, really.
Lovely. Let's have a listen.
Well, I'm back with my old mate Terry Walton, and we've just finished the classic Walton podcast that's featured on the Gardener's Click website. And anyway, I've been quested with extrapolating 3 top tips for this month from you, Terry. So
I've never been extrapolated. I've never been to some people.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
I've been extrapolated.
The amount of times you spent away from home. So
3 top tips.
Three top tips.
Well, that's going to tax the memory, and
the first one thing that occurred to me is something that we were talking about now is that you've got some fantastic rhubarb growing in the allotment. One freshly planted root this year has thrown a seed head already in April.
I know, and that's an August task. I mean, really, after you had several bunches of this and you've sort of tacked it for quite a while, it says, "Oh, to hell with this! I'm gonna go to seed. He won't eat any more of me then."
Yeah.
And normally in August, up comes this massive eruption, this grotesque-looking thing that grows out the middle, and that then saps the strength of the crown. So mainly you've got to get down to ground level, get a sharp knife, and remove completely that seed head, because plant's job in life is to make seed, and once it's made seed, it's done its job, and the whole crown will suffer. So you really need to if you see any sign of this, particularly this year, taking place, and we've wandered around, it seems to be prevalent on the allotments completely.
It's a wonderful thing, though, isn't it, to look at? You know, you've got that wonderful, great sort of bulbous head that's just about to erupt from its little enclosure, and ultimately it turns into a wonderful array of miniature white flowers.
Oh yeah, it's quite. If you want a colourful looking show, then do it. But it doesn't do your crown a lot of good. It's like there was these things that they grow with flowers every sort of 100 years. This is what you want a rhubarb. You want the thing to eat for 100 years and then take a seed head out.
Yeah.
But for some unknown reason this year, it's done that. But we just can't afford to leave that there because
so you've got to get it out.
You've
so
got to down to ground level, sharp knife, right down to where it's coming out of the ground, because it tends to be right at ground level.
Right.
Take it out and get rid of it sort of way, and keep a careful eye, because it's had a taste of seed. You know, it may well fancy doing it again, so you may get another seed head come up.
Okay.
So it's always possible.
Right, fabulous. Now the other thing I noticed, of course, your strawberries are looking wonderful. They're growing big and juicy, and there are even flowers appearing on them as early as the middle of April this year. But what would you say to be able to allow people to get a nice early feed off their strawberries?
Well, again, if you let them come naturally, they're going to take quite a few more weeks. Take about 8 to 10 plants. Make a little cloche of those 8 to 10 plants, and a little bit of a microclimate, a little bit of extra warmth in the air will add greatly to those coming out much quicker. But beware, don't forget that these flowers have to be pollinated. No pollination, no strawberry. So do it in the day. Take those little fleeces off, the little covers off, whatever you decide to use with the cloche, to allow the insects to pollinate. But as the evening comes in, it starts to go typical cooler April evening. Put the cloche back over, keeps them nice and warm and snug over the day. Whip them off again first thing in the morning on a decent day until the strawberries are formed. Once the strawberries are formed, you'll see the little strawberries forming there. You can leave the cloche on, and that will enable those to get ripened that much quicker.
Right.
So you can pinch 3 to 4 weeks on your strawberry crop. Leave the rest come on naturally, but get about 6 to 8 of these, and just get a big greedy and have an early feed as soon as you can.
Okay, fantastic. Right, and thirdly, the old parsnips. You know, people often say they struggle with parsnips. They struggle to get them to germinate, and in recent years you've suffered from a bit of canker. So what would be your tip for a bit of parsnip husbandry for this month?
Well, with parsnips, again, they need a long season, because bear in mind they are growing. You're not going to need a winter crop. You don't usually harvest for the frost. And again, if you're going to put them in, you're getting on the brink of not being able to do it now. But get the old crowbar out, or get something decent length out, bore a hole in the ground, fill it with 75% compost and 25% horticultural sand, and then plant about 5 little seeds in the top of that. And again, once you put them in, fleece clutch them, because, and I do recommend you use fleece over the top of these, even fleece seed.
Yeah. What is fleece?
Even fleece seed, because that is a wonderful medium, that, because it breathes. The moisture comes through, and on the sunny days the moisture travels back out, so it keeps a nice warm, damp atmosphere in there. Right. And these will come up on the damn side quicker. Right. And you can guarantee you've planted all these little stations along the way, and you'll find that 1 or 2 of them will miss. Now, my little backup for that is to take a little half seed tray, a bit of kitchen towel on the bottom, make it nice and damp, sprinkle some seeds on the kitchen towel, put another piece of kitchen towel on the top and make that nice and damp, pop it in a warm place like the airing cupboard, and within 7 to 10 days you'll see the little white tail coming out of the back end of the parsnip seed.
Right.
Get a couple of toilet rolls, or empty toilet rolls, and fill them with compost, and plant 2 or 3 seeds in each of these toilet rolls, and where these little gaps are, then you can just open up the hole, drop the toilet roll in, and these will fill up the gaps, and these parsnips would have caught up with the ones you planted in the ground. Right. And you can't grow enough in the airing cupboard to do all that, but that way you can get a little gap filler, and they will all be on an even keel. Those in the ground will take a while to come up, even under the fleece, whereas the toilet roll ones will come up much quicker. So you've got a backup then to fill those gaps that don't occur.
Fantastic. Okay, and before I leave you, you're doing a few talks and stuff like that. But where can the listener come and see you this year? Do talks? You're at Malvern Spring Show.
I'm at Malvern on the Friday the 8th. I'm there to do a show. I think it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Right. Doing a show there. I'm up at Sandringham then at the end of July. I think it's the 29th of July. Right. And
what's at Sandringham?
It's the Royal Show with his HRH. Okay. Our Prince. He's coming along. It's only a 1-day show. Yeah. It's a specialised show, and I'm going along there as well to hopefully do a talk there. Okay. On organic growing. Hopefully that's the theme of the show. Yeah. And at the moment, I think then I'm doing for those people who are residing in the north of Wales at the moment. It looks at the 20th of August. I could be coming up to do one on the 20th of August up at Denby. So, okay. Yeah. So that one. I've just finished a rather gruelling weekend down at the RHS in Cardiff. Yep. Well, we produced this. Went well, didn't it? It went very well. The Friday was a bit wet. It was a miserable day Friday. We got rather wet planting this edible border. But come Saturday and Sunday, the crowds came out, the sun came out, and it was absolutely fantastic time. And we had some great fun on it. It was a great show to do, and people are very interested these days in not just growing flowers and vegetables, but combining the two. Right. We're on a quest to get people to give up a bit of their lawn, or make a little raised bed, or start using containers around the place. Because everybody can get this taste of fresh vegetables in the smallest space possible, even down to the fact that you may live in a 10-storey flat and you only got a windowsill. You can put a couple of herbs and a couple of salad plants in. So this year is the year everybody's got to grow and taste their own. And come down this time next year, once they've got that taste for this homegrown flavour, there'll be this massive demand, and we'll overwhelm all these councils with a demand for allotments. There'll be thousands of them out there next year looking for these allotments.
We will be.
We won't have to import any food. We're going to cure this credit crunch ourselves.
Yeah, it sounds perfectly reasonable to me. All right, I'm going to head off now. I'll speak to you in on.
Okay, it's been a great day again.
Cheers, Dewey.
Cheers.
Next week's show, we are going to hear about my royal invitation.
Oh, yes.
We're going to hear about Richard and Rachel heading out early one morning to see curlews. Yep. Farmer Phil will no doubt have been streaking somewhere else.
Quite possibly.
What was the name of that lass who went across the cricket pitch?
I don't know.
Erica Rowe.
Okay.
The Erica Rowe of Blakemere will be up to something or other, and we catch up with the hay garden. So I think it's goodbye from us this week. If you could possibly tell your mates to tune in, that would be raving handy, because we could do with 5 more listeners. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye from me.